My father died, and a month later, I found out she was getting married to her boss. We'd been married for 5 years. For most of that time, she was the picture of the perfect wife. Julia was warm, caring, always looking out for me and making sure everything around the house was just right. She had this way of making me feel like the most important person in the world. I often found myself thinking I'd hit the jackpot with her. It wasn't just about the big moments, like birthdays or anniversaries. It was the little things, the gentle texts during the day, the warm dinners when I came home, the way she always listened when I had a bad day. People said I was lucky, and I thought so too. But then, everything changed. It was just a regular Tuesday when I got the call. My dad had passed away unexpectedly. He'd been ill for a while, but it still hit me hard. The funeral was a blur. Julia was there for me, as she always had been. She helped me with everything, from the arrangements to taking care of the details. She was there, consoling me, like the loving wife I'd come to rely on. But something was off. Maybe it was the fact that my mind was clouded by grief, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was a little too perfect, almost like she was overcompensating. I chalked it up to stress and sadness. I needed her to be my rock, and she was. But as time passed, I started to notice subtle changes. After the funeral, she became even more caring, almost like she was trying to fill a void, not just in me, but in the space my dad had left. It was strange. She started doing things I hadn't asked for, taking care of the finances, organizing everything down to the smallest detail in the house. It felt like she was taking over, and I didn't mind at first. I thought she was just trying to help, trying to keep me from falling apart. Then came the news. A month after my dad passed, I discovered that my father had left me the family business and the house. He hadn't told me about it, but Julia knew. It wasn't like it was a huge fortune, but it was enough to change things. I thought it would be a fresh start, a way for me to step up and make something of myself, something to carry on my father's legacy. But the moment the will was read, something shifted. Julia's attitude towards me changed. She became even more doting, even more affectionate. It was as if she was trying to show me that everything would be okay. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't telling me. One afternoon, as we were sitting in the living room, her phone rang. I didn't think much of it at first, but then she stepped out to take the call. It wasn't uncommon for her to step away when a call came in, but this time, she looked different. She looked more nervous than usual, and when she returned, she was acting strange, almost like she was hiding something. I didn't confront her, though. I was still grieving, still trying to manage everything with my father's passing. I let it go. But things didn't stay the same for long. A week after the reading of the will, Julia asked for a divorce, just like that. No warning, no discussion. It felt like a punch to the gut. We were supposed to be in this together, right? We'd built this life, and now, just when things were starting to look up, she was asking to leave. She said she wanted a fresh start, that she couldn't deal with the weight of everything that had happened. She claimed it wasn't me. It was the stress, the pressure of losing my dad, and everything that had come with it. It felt like an excuse, a justification. I couldn't understand it. I thought we were in this together. But then, as if to add insult to injury, Julia left me a letter. Not just a simple note, but a carefully written goodbye. In it, she expressed how she'd always cared for me, how she wanted me to be happy, and that she hoped we could part on good terms. She talked about her hopes for the future, how she needed to be her own person, and how this was the best for both of us. There was nothing in that letter that made sense to me. It was like she was saying goodbye to a life we had built, a life I had thought was real. I was heartbroken, confused, and angry. But more than that, I felt betrayed. I didn't know what had happened, but something didn't sit right. And then, in the weeks that followed, I started to dig. Something in my gut told me that there was more to this than just a simple divorce. I started going through old documents, looking over emails and texts that I hadn't paid much attention to before. What I found left me stunned. Julia had been hiding things from me for a long time, not just her feelings, but her plans. She had been secretly seeing someone, her boss, someone I had always respected. She had been having an affair with him for months, and I had never even suspected it. And it wasn't just the affair. As I dug deeper, I found something even more shocking. Julia had forged my signature on our prenuptial agreement. She'd manipulated the documents to make sure she would walk away with everything. The house, the business, the money. It was all part of a plan I couldn't even begin to fathom. She had used my father's death as a cover, playing the role of the loving wife, only to betray me when I was at my weakest. I didn't know what to do at first. But then, I decided to fight back. I hired a lawyer, and we started investigating. The evidence was clear. Julia had not only committed adultery, but she had also committed fraud. I didn't want to believe it at first, but the truth was undeniable. The court returned everything to me: the business, the house, and the money. Julia's new fiancé was arrested for fraud, and her entire life came crashing down around her. The shock of it all was overwhelming. But in the end, I couldn't help but feel relieved. I had been betrayed, but I had also won. Julia had thought she could get away with it all. But the truth always has a way of coming out. And now, I could finally begin to heal. The aftermath was a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I felt this overwhelming sense of relief, like I could finally breathe again after holding my breath for so long. On the other hand, I was still grappling with the feelings of betrayal, confusion, and anger that came with finding out the woman I had loved and trusted had deceived me in such a profound way. The relief came from knowing that I had my life back, that I was no longer shackled by the web of lies she had spun. But the anger and heartbreak were still there, gnawing at me every time I thought about how she had manipulated me. The divorce was finalized relatively quickly after the investigation. Julia didn't fight back. Perhaps because she knew the truth was out. Her lawyer, once confident, now seemed far less sure as we presented the evidence of her deceit. The court ruled in my favor, and while it didn't fully undo the damage she had caused, it gave me some semblance of justice. The business was mine again, and the house, my father's house, was also returned to me. But the hardest part came after everything was settled. The silence. The house that had once felt like a home now felt like a cold, empty shell. I had spent so many years building this life, this dream, with Julia. Now it was just me. And it was hard to come to terms with the fact that everything I thought was real had been a lie. The quiet echoes of the house only made it harder to process. It was a constant reminder of the years I had wasted, of the trust I had given to someone who had ultimately used me. I started staying late at the office, diving deep into work as a way to escape the quiet and the painful memories. But even that couldn't keep the thoughts at bay. Every corner of the house, every picture frame, every little thing reminded me of Julia. I started to distance myself from my friends and family, not wanting to explain what had happened. It was easier to retreat into myself, to pretend like everything was okay. But eventually, things began to shift. Time, as it always does, started to heal some of the wounds. Slowly, I found myself getting back to the things that brought me joy before everything fell apart. I took long walks in the park, reconnected with old friends, and started to focus on myself in ways I hadn't in years. I even began to work on the business my father had left me, something I had neglected for too long. It was during one of these walks, about 6 months after everything had been settled, that I ran into her. Julia. I hadn't seen her since the divorce. She looked different. Her hair was styled differently, and there was something in her eyes, a look of regret, maybe? She approached me cautiously, as if unsure how I would react. "Hey," she said softly. "Can we talk?" I didn't know what to say at first. I had spent so much time trying to move on, trying to forget what she had done. But there she was, standing in front of me, asking for a conversation. I took a deep breath and nodded. "What do you want, Julia?" She hesitated for a moment, as if trying to find the right words. "I owe you an apology," she began. "For everything. For the lies, for the betrayal. I don't know what came over me. I was so caught up in my own insecurities, my own desires, and I hurt you. I'm sorry." There was a part of me that wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her, to shout at her, to tell her how much she had destroyed me. But as I looked at her, I realized that wasn't going to help either of us. The damage had already been done. There was no going back, no fixing the broken pieces. "You don't need to apologize," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. "It's over, and I've moved on." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. "I just got lost in everything. And now, I don't know what to do with myself." I wasn't sure how to respond. A part of me felt sorry for her, but another part of me was still angry that she had taken so much from me. "It's too late for us, Julia," I said quietly. "We're both different people now, and I'm not the one you need to apologize to. You need to make peace with yourself." She nodded again, her face a mixture of sadness and regret. "I understand," she said softly before turning and walking away. As I watched her leave, I couldn't help but feel like that was the closure I had needed. She had hurt me, betrayed me, and tried to take everything I had worked for. But in the end, she was the one left with nothing. No business, no house, and no relationship with me. It was hard to move on completely. It always is when you've given so much of yourself to someone. But over time, I started to realize that the most important thing was that I had come out stronger on the other side. I had my integrity, my dignity, and my future ahead of me. Julia's betrayal had shattered me, but it had also given me the chance to rebuild, to focus on the things that truly mattered. And for the first time in a long time, I could finally say that I was free. Life started to feel like it was moving forward again, slowly but steadily. There were days when I'd wake up and feel this weight lifting off my chest, as if the cloud that had loomed over me for so long was finally starting to clear. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when I'd catch myself thinking about Julia, about the life we could have had. But those moments became fewer, and the pain began to dull with time. I threw myself into the business my father had left me. It was hard at first. My heart wasn't in it after everything that had happened. The place felt foreign to me, as if I was stepping into a life that no longer belonged to me. But as the months went by, I started to rediscover a part of myself I had lost during the years I spent focusing on Julia and our marriage. I began to make decisions that felt true to me, and for the first time, I felt like I was in control. My father had built this business, but now it was mine to grow, to shape. And that responsibility was something I took seriously. I also started to meet new people. Not in the romantic sense, I wasn't ready for that yet, but in the sense of building new friendships and connections, something that had taken a back seat while I was married. I reconnected with old friends who had drifted away over the years, and I made new ones at work. It felt good to laugh again, to talk about things that weren't related to Julia or my past. I wasn't defined by what had happened anymore. One evening after work, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The air was crisp, and the streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalk. I was just walking, lost in my thoughts, when I heard a voice behind me. "Jake?" I turned, and for a split second I froze. There she was, Julia. She hadn't changed much. She still looked the same, but there was something different about her. Something more vulnerable, more stripped down. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I've been thinking about everything, and I just wanted to say, again, how sorry I am." I didn't know how to react. Seeing her again was like seeing a ghost from a life that had been erased, a life that was now nothing more than a memory. I could feel the tension building in my chest, but I kept my composure. "It's been a while," I said calmly. "I thought you were gone for good." I was trying to be," she admitted. "But it hasn't been easy, and I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed to say it to you in person. I just can't keep pretending like I don't care about what happened." The old wounds flared up, and for a moment I felt the anger creeping back. But instead of lashing out, I took a deep breath. The past was the past. There was nothing to gain from dragging it back into the present. "I've moved on, Julia," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not the same person I was when we were together, and I don't hold on to the anger anymore." She nodded, looking like she had just taken a weight off her shoulders. "I guess that's all I needed to hear," she said softly. "I don't expect us to be friends, but I didn't want to leave things unfinished." I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say next. It was strange, seeing her like this. The Julia I had known was confident, assured, always in control. But now, she seemed like she was lost, a person who had made so many mistakes that they didn't know how to fix them. And I wondered if she ever truly understood the depth of what she had done to me. "You'll be okay," I said finally. We'll both be okay." And with that, she turned and walked away. I watched her for a moment, but I didn't follow. I didn't feel the need to. As she disappeared into the night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The truth was, I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the lies, they had shaped me, but they hadn't broken me. If anything, they had pushed me to grow, to become a version of myself that I hadn't known existed. I had a future ahead of me, one that was full of possibilities and new beginnings. Julia was part of my past now, a chapter I had closed. And as I continued down the sidewalk, heading back to the place I now called home, I realized that I was finally free. Free from the chains of betrayal, free from the ghosts of the past. The journey had been painful, but it had taught me something invaluable. It had taught me that no matter how far you fall, you can always rise again. You can always rebuild, and you can always find your way back to who you truly are. And as I looked up at the stars above me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. A hope that, no matter what had happened before, my future was still waiting to be written. As I continued to navigate through the aftermath, I began to appreciate the sense of independence that was slowly forming in my life. There were days when I missed the companionship, the shared quiet moments, the inside jokes, the comfort of having someone there. But those moments were fleeting, and every time they surfaced, I reminded myself that what I had once seen as love was actually a web of deception. I started to focus more on what I wanted, not just in my career, but in my personal life as well. I wasn't ready to jump into another relationship, not yet. But the thought of it didn't scare me anymore. For the first time in a long time, I realized that I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was whole, even if the pieces didn't fit perfectly right now. The business began to thrive again. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the pressure of it all felt overwhelming. But I knew that if my father could build something from the ground up, then so could I. The idea of failure, which had once seemed terrifying, now felt like a distant memory. Failure was a part of life, but it no longer had the power to define me. I could rise above it, just like I had with Julia. And in time, I started to see the world around me in a new light. The people I worked with, the friends I had rediscovered, they were the ones who truly mattered. They were the ones who had been there when I had nothing, when I was just a shell of a person, drowning in pain. And now, I could see the difference between genuine love and the toxic kind of affection Julia had offered me. One day, about a year after everything had settled, I received a call from my lawyer. I had almost forgotten about the ongoing legal battle with Julia over the forged prenup and the fraudulent activities surrounding our divorce. It had taken a while, but the courts had been slow but thorough in uncovering the full extent of what she had done. It wasn't just about the money or the business, it was the manipulation, the planning, the careful destruction of everything I had built. And Julia's new fiancé? It turned out he wasn't just an accomplice. He had a history of financial fraud. The whole thing was a well-orchestrated scheme. My lawyer told me that the authorities had finally issued a ruling. Julia would be facing legal consequences for what she had done: the fraud, the manipulation, and the conspiracy. She had tried to get away with everything, but the truth always comes to light. It wasn't what I had initially wanted. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was focused on moving forward. But in a way, it was satisfying to know that justice was being served. Julia had taken so much from me, and while I could never get back the years I had spent with her, I at least knew that her actions weren't going to go unpunished. The days that followed were filled with a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt relief, knowing that she was finally going to face the consequences of her actions. But another part of me felt sad. It was the end of an era, a chapter that had been filled with love, lies, and betrayal. I realized that even though she had hurt me, I still cared about the person she used to be. The woman I had married wasn't the woman I knew now, and perhaps she never truly was. I took a weekend trip to clear my head. It wasn't anything fancy, just a quiet cabin in the mountains. I spent my days hiking, reading, and reflecting on everything that had happened. I found myself writing in a journal for the first time in years, letting my thoughts spill out onto the page. It felt good to release the emotions I had kept buried for so long. And it was during one of these quiet nights, as I sat by the fire, that I realized something important. I wasn't broken. I had thought for so long that losing Julia, losing everything, meant that I had lost myself too. But I hadn't. I had emerged from that darkness stronger, more resilient. The person who had been betrayed was no longer the person I was now. I was someone who had learned to trust again. Not in others, but in myself. I had learned that no matter how hard life can knock you down, you always have the ability to get back up. That was the true power. Not the revenge, not the judgment, but the strength to walk away from the past and keep moving forward. When I returned home, things seemed different. The business was running smoothly, the house felt more like a home than it ever had, and I had begun to embrace the new friendships I'd formed. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine to shape. I thought about the future more often now, about what it might look like. It wasn't defined by Julia anymore. It wasn't clouded by betrayal or anger. It was about the possibilities that lay ahead, the new paths I could take, and the person I was becoming. It didn't matter if Julia had moved on or not. I had learned that the only person I needed to be concerned with was myself. And for the first time in a long time, I could say that I was content. Content with who I was and who I was becoming. The chapter with Julia was closed, and I was finally ready for the next one. A few months passed, and life had, for the most part, found a new rhythm. The business was growing, the house felt more like a sanctuary than a place filled with memories of betrayal, and I was slowly but surely starting to rebuild a life I could be proud of. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. Then, one afternoon, I received an email that caught me completely off guard. It was from an old friend, Marcus. We had worked together back when things were good, back when I was married to Julia and life seemed simple. Marcus had always been the kind of friend who called it like it was, a blunt but loyal guy. We had lost touch after everything fell apart, but this email was a surprise. The subject line read, "Hey man, it's time to talk." Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. "Jake," the email began, "I know it's been a while, but I need to tell you something. Something I should have said a long time ago. I've been meaning to reach out, but I wasn't sure how you would take it. But after everything that's happened, I feel like you deserve to know the truth. You've probably guessed that something wasn't right with Julia. Well, I want to tell you what I know. I don't think she'll ever admit it, but I think it's time you hear it from someone who was there. When you were still married, Julia had been talking about this new life plan. She was preparing for something. I never fully understood what it was, but she had been laying the groundwork for a while. She was determined to get everything you had, and more. I had no idea about the affair at the time, but looking back, I can see it now. She was always talking about how she was going to get what was rightfully hers. I don't expect you to forgive me for not saying something sooner. I should have told you when I first suspected it, but I was scared of losing my job, scared of what would happen if I spoke up. But now, I just wanted you to know that it wasn't your fault. It wasn't you. It was her. The email left me stunned. I sat there, staring at the screen, processing the words. Marcus wasn't the kind of guy who sugarcoated things, and he wasn't the kind of guy who would lie about something like this. It wasn't just the affair or the forgery. It was the cold, calculated planning behind it all. Julia had never just fallen out of love with me. This was something far more sinister, something she had been plotting for a long time. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me again, but this time it wasn't the same burning rage I had felt months before. This was more like a quiet understanding, a realization that what she had done to me wasn't just about one mistake or one betrayal. It was a pattern, a desire for control and power, no matter who got hurt in the process. And I had been the one caught in the middle of it all. I responded to Marcus's email with a short message. "Thanks for telling me. It's good to know the truth, even if it doesn't change anything. I appreciate it." I didn't need to respond more than that. The truth was out, and it wasn't going to change anything for me. I had already moved on. A few days later, I ran into Marcus at a local coffee shop. We exchanged pleasantries and talked for a while, but the conversation didn't feel heavy. It didn't need to. He had done the right thing by telling me the truth, even if it had taken a long time. He didn't owe me an explanation, but the fact that he had come forward meant something. It was a sign that I was finally closing the door on that chapter and the people who had been part of it. After our conversation, I left the coffee shop with a sense of finality. Julia's manipulation, her lies, and her betrayal had affected me in ways I never thought I could heal from. But I had. I had rebuilt my life, and I was finally living it on my own terms. There was no need to let her or anyone else from that part of my past hold power over me. The truth about Julia's calculated betrayal had been the last puzzle piece. Now that I had it, I could finally see the whole picture, and it wasn't as painful as it once had been. It was simply a chapter in my life. And in the grand scheme of things, that chapter didn't define me. As I stood there on the sidewalk looking up at the sky, I realized something important. Sometimes the hardest part of moving on isn't just letting go of the past. It's accepting that things weren't meant to be the way you thought they would be. Life doesn't always turn out the way you expect. And sometimes the things you think will break end up making you stronger. I had lost a lot along the way: love, trust, stability, but I had gained something far more valuable. I had gained a deeper understanding of who I was and what I deserved. The future was unwritten, but for the first time I was looking forward to what it might hold. And I knew that no matter what came next, I was ready for it. As the months wore on, life seemed to settle into a rhythm that was less about surviving and more about living. I'd learned to be at peace with the choices I had made, both the ones I'd made in the past and the ones I was making now. The pain of the betrayal had been replaced by a quiet strength. It was like the weight of the world had slowly lifted off my shoulders, and I was able to breathe deeply again. Every day was a little more about me and less about what had been taken from me. I had become something I hadn't recognized before. Someone independent. Someone who no longer defined himself by the mistakes or actions of others. But that didn't mean I wasn't still haunted by certain parts of my past. The memories of Julia, of the good times we had shared, occasionally crept in like shadows, reminding me of what I'd once had and lost. But now, when they came, they didn't sting. They were just memories. I had learned how to live with them, how to let them pass through me without holding on to them too tightly. The business continued to grow, and it was becoming more and more a reflection of who I was now, rather than who I had been. I had taken risks that had paid off. I was making decisions that made me proud, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly in control of my own destiny. Still, there were moments when I caught myself wondering what might have been. What if things had turned out differently with Julia? What if we hadn't drifted apart? What if she hadn't betrayed me so completely? But then, I would shake those thoughts away. Life had a way of unfolding the way it was meant to, and maybe that's what I needed to learn to accept. Sometimes things fall apart so something else can take their place. One evening, after a long day at the office, I was sitting in the quiet of my living room when I received a text message. I didn't recognize the number, but something about it felt familiar. "Jake," it started, "I hope you're doing well. I know this is probably the last thing you want, but I need to tell you something. I'm not expecting you to forgive me, but I need you to know the truth." The message was from Julia. For a moment, my heart stopped. I hadn't heard from her in months, and I certainly hadn't expected to hear from her now. Part of me was curious. Part of me was afraid of what she might say. But I didn't hesitate long before I replied. "What is it, Julia?" I typed back, "What do you want?" Her response came quickly. "I know you've probably moved on by now, but I just need you to know that I'm sorry. I made so many mistakes. I was selfish, and I never thought about how my actions would affect you. I should have been honest with you from the start. I wasn't. I've been trying to understand myself these past few months, and I realize how much I hurt you. But I want you to know that I'm not the same person I was. I'm trying to be better, for me, and I hope you can find it in yourself to let go of the past." I sat there, staring at the message, the words lingering in the air like a heavy weight. Part of me wanted to respond with anger. I wanted to remind her of everything she'd done, the lies, the manipulation. I wanted to tell her how much she had shattered my life, how much she had taken from me. But instead, I took a deep breath and let the message settle. The truth was, I didn't need closure from her anymore. I had already closed that chapter. I had already moved on, with or without her apology. I replied with a simple, "I appreciate you reaching out. I've moved on, Julia. I've made peace with everything. I wish you well, but I think it's time for both of us to let go of the past." I hit send and put the phone down, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. That was it. That was all I needed to say. No more lingering bitterness, no more unresolved questions. She had apologized, but the truth was, I didn't need her apology to move forward. I had already done that on my own. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity. Julia's apology, however sincere it might have been, wasn't going to change anything. What mattered now was what I chose to do with the rest of my life. I had the power to shape my future, and I wasn't going to let my past dictate what came next. I went about my day with purpose, handling the business, meeting with colleagues, and spending time with friends who had been there for me when I needed them the most. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel weighed down by the past. It was as if I had finally shed the last remnants of a life that no longer served me. As I walked through the office later that afternoon, a smile spread across my face. I was in control of my life now, and that was more than enough. It wasn't about revenge, or anger, or even forgiveness anymore. It was about moving forward, about living fully and embracing the person I had become. The person who had faced betrayal and came out the other side stronger, more self-aware, and more resilient than ever before. And so I continued down the path I had chosen. It wasn't always easy, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I could honestly say that I was happy.